So in this chapter we'll review the setup of the MEPs, the motor evoked potentials. We'll start with definition of the electrodes that we use for triggering the MEP signal, and they are defined again as for the SSCPs by the 10-20 rule. What are the electrodes that are interesting for the MEPs? The T3, C3, CZ, C4 and T4, and of course FZ. FZ per definition is the reference point for the SSCPs, but usually you put the reference electrodes for the MEPs very near to FZ point. So the screw electrodes both for the SSCPs and the MEPs are in place. And to make things easier to understand, we have labeled the electrodes. You see T3 through T4 and the reference electrode. And again here in a situation where you can a little better appreciate the anatomy, the position of the electrodes again. So these electrodes will induce muscle activity, so-called compound muscle action potentials. And depending on where you put your surface electrodes, which muscle, you will get a pattern of potential movement by triggering of the MEP electrodes. And usually you take electrodes which detect face muscles, arm muscles, hand muscles and leg muscles. And you might consider for control reasons to also trigger muscle responses from the ipsilateral side. So typically muscles you will use are for the face the large muscles like orbicularis, oris and mentalis. For the arm you usually take the big biceps, and for the forearm extensor and flexor brachioradialis. For the hand you will usually take the hypothenar and the interosseous, and for the leg you have the choice to take tibialis anterior, abductor hallucis or quadriceps. To make things easier as an observer, you should group the electrodes in a way that you have topological order. So face, arm, hand and legs should come together so that one glance at the EMG recording could give you approximate localization of the stimulation. Is more face, is more arm, is more hand or even leg. So here's a typical setup for the face, musculus orbicularis oris on both sides as a control, and muscle mentalis. So here's a typical setup for the arm, musculus biceps brachii as a flexor, and the muscle extensor digitorum as an extender are detected by those electrodes. In addition, for the forearm muscles you could detect the flexor of the hands by putting needles into the muscle flexor digitorum. Now for the hand you usually put needles into the ID1, which is the interosseous 1, and in the muscle abductor digiti minimi on the 5th finger, and the muscle opponens pollicis. So this would be the typical setup for the face and the upper extremities. Now let's review the leg. A typical muscle that you monitor at the leg is the muscle abductor hallucis and the muscle tibialis anterior. So this setup covers in principle the monitoring of the face, arm, hand and leg, but according to your specific situation and what you want to focus on, you can of course take more muscles in the arm or in the leg. You can include the quadriceps. You can monitor the cricothyroides depending differently on what the focus of your surgeries will be. So this is what you're aiming for. You want to have a clear correlation between the stimulation side and the cortical and subcortical signals corresponding to the muscles. So correlation between localization of stimulation and muscle, resulting in a very useful cortical and subcortical mapping. So the previous was for the monopolar cortical subcortical mapping, as well as for the grid electrode that you see here. You can see the correspondence of the cortical stimulation by the grid in correlation to the localization, face, arm, hand and leg.